What is up, everyone? JD here. I hope you're all doing well today. Today, I'm really excited to bring you my full knife review of the Artisan Cutlery Sirius. This one here is a Ray Laconico design. I picked up the satin AR RPM 9 version of it with the black G10 and the copper pivot collar and titanium, we'll call it deep carry pocket clip. This one here has a 3.54 inch AR RPM 9 blade steel. It has a 4.5 inch G10 scale coming in at a 8.04 inch total length and weighing 3 ounces. Let's go ahead and test that weight out right now. Scale is ready to go. Let's see if it's 3 ounces even or not. All right, so scale says 3.1. 3.1, so a little bit heavier than advertised. So not too bad though. 3.1, it could be really close to that 3 ounce mark. So I'm not going to take away from that too much. This one here is a flat grind that's very thin behind the edge, and it has a swedge, what that means is that when you're going through your push cuts, this is going to reduce the drag from the top of the blade. This is very thin and slicey, and it does cut through the cardboard and slices the paper very well. So this one here has this version, because there's a couple of different ones. It has the flipper tab, and it also has the thumb studs. If you can tell the action, this is on bearings. This is very snappy, and it is shake shut. The one complaint I have about this one here is the jimping is not my favorite. It's actually very shallow into the blade, and it doesn't wrap around, and it is going to hit that stop pin, but I feel like they could have wrapped the jimping if they would have gone a little bit smaller, like this jimping here. So this jimping goes all the way around, and I know they probably couldn't have gone all the way, but this jimping here I prefer because it has a little bit more of a grip to it than this spaced out jimping. Like I said, and it's really, really smooth. It really depends on you getting your finger in exactly the right spot for that flip. The other thing that I complain about on this one is because of the fact that it only has the thumb stud on the one side, and I kind of get that because your access to the liner lock is right there. But I feel like it's a missed opportunity for the lefties out there, or you just should have made it front flipper only maybe. I guess the thumb stud, if you're not good with the front flipper, but you really like the design of this knife and want this knife, that makes it a nice option for you. And of course, if you're left-handed, you can always do the reverse flip. So I'm a little cold coming into that flip, so I missed it a little bit. The look is kind of like wood grain, but it's actually a smooth G10. It has hardly any texturing to it at all whatsoever. It's a little bit tacky, but it's not tacky enough. I'd like to have been a little bit softer and a little bit more tacky. I think I'd like that a little bit more. Let me go ahead and, oh, the other thing before I forget, the pass-through to the liner lock is actually really small, and it actually kind of chews the thumb up a little bit when you try to get in there to get to it. You have to be very cognizant of where you're putting your thumb when you go to get it. And I also would have liked to have seen a little bit of jimping right here on the actual liner lock itself to get to it, because it's quite uncomfortable, and I don't always feel very confident that I have it in a good enough position to push through to make that open really nice. The satin blade, I'm not really a big fan of. As you can see, I've got fingerprints and smudges all over it already, and I wiped it off before I started to open for this review. You can see right there, it's the AR RPM 9 blade steel. You can get a really good look at that pivot collar. It looks really, really nice. I imagine that'll patina over time. Let me go ahead and bring out some comparison knives for this review so you guys can get a good idea of the size of this particular knife. All right, first up, I'm going to bring out my Spyderco Yojimbo 2. This is the DLT training exclusive. This one has a 3.125 inch coated 20 CV blade steel, 4.5 inch G10 scales for an overall length of 7.5 inches and weighing in at 4 ounces. So you can see here that the Sirius is a little bit longer than this overall, but obviously has a slender profile, so it's going to be a very good EDC type knife. Next up, I'm going to bring out my Spyderco PM2. This one here has a 3.44 inch S45 VN blade with 4.81 inch titanium G10 scales. Overall length 8.25 inches and weighing in at 3.75 ounces. So you can see the length mirrors that a little bit more of the PM2. And even though it is a little bit more slender, the footprint is pretty similar, I think, for these two knives because of the length. Now, of course, when you close the PM2 is going to be much taller because it has the Spidey hole there for flicking it open. Let me go ahead and bring out a couple other comparison knives and we'll come back for the profiles. Next up I'm going to bring out is my Benchmade Bug Out. This one here is going to be really similar to this, and I like this comparison here a lot. The Bug Out has a 3.24 inch S30V blade with 4.22 inch titanium G10 scales. Overall length is 7.46 inches and coming in at 2.3 ounces. So you can see the footprint is very similar because these are both more slender. The Ray Laconico Sirius is longer overall but slightly thinner. The other knife that I'd like to bring out for the crossbar lock is the SIG K320. This one here is made by Hogue. The blade length on the SIG is 3.5 inches and is also S30V. It has a 4.5 inch polymer handle and the overall length is 8 inches, coming in at 4.16 ounces. So you can see here the Ray Laconico is actually longer than both of these knives when you compare it from tip to handle, but it is much thinner in profile. It's going to be a lot friendlier from an EDC perspective because it's not going to take up a lot of pocket space. It's just going to go deeper down into the pocket. Let me go ahead and bring out the last two comparison knives for this review, and then we'll do some profile and I'll give you my final thoughts on this particular knife because I do have some other thoughts that I'd like to go over. So first I'm going to bring out a knife that I think is going to compare really well to this from a profile perspective, and that's going to be the Civivi Elementum button lock. The button lock has a 3.47 inch 14C28N blade steel, 4.53 inch handles with micarta scales. Overall length is 8 inches and it's coming in at 3.19 ounces, so 8.01 versus 8 overall. You can tell this is a very, very good comparison right here. So I'm going to circle back to that in just a minute because it'll stay on the table, but I want to bring out my last budget knife, and that's going to be the Kubi KU 321. The 321 has a 2.99 inch D2 steel blade with 4.29 inch G10 handles for an overall length of 7.28 inches. The Kubi comes in at 3.32 ounces, so much lighter. Still, I felt like it was good to bring both budget knives out here because I feel like from a profile perspective, when you have them opened, they're very similar as far as their shape and the footprint that they take in the pocket. But really quickly, and I'm going to leave the Elementum out here, but I want to do the profiles so you can see how thin and or thick this knife is. When you close them up, you can see it's a little bit more slender, but you see why I say it's very similar. But it's going to just carry deeper into the pocket, and you're going to have a little bit more sticking out because of this titanium pocket clip. But I honestly kind of prefer the milled pocket clips. I like the way that they look, and they're much more comfortable, in my opinion, in hand. So let's look at the profiles. I'm going to switch hands on you guys. You can see here the Sirius is much thinner than the Kubi. Sorry, they're bumping into each other. The little flipper tabs are bumping into each other. So let me do it this way. There you go. So you can see the Sirius is much thinner. We'll go ahead and bring the Bug out because that's a really thin knife, and I have to bring my thumb out here because of this contour right here. I have to put my thumb out on the pivot and then try to work them into place. So I think they're very similar, and I'm going to call that probably pretty even. Maybe the Bug out might be a little bit thicker because of the contouring, but that's pretty close. We're going to go ahead and bring out the SIG K320, which is going to be much thicker at the head, and then when you compare down at the butt, just slightly thicker, and that's because this contours up as you get closer towards the head of the knife handle, And then I'm going to bring out the Yojimbo 2, which is the same thickness as the Para 3, and you can see that's pretty close. The Ray Laconico is a little bit thinner, but not by much. I don't know if you noticed that too much. And I'm not going to go ahead and bring the PM2 out because I know the contoured scales are much thicker. And actually, you know, I did want to do the profile comparison for this before I go back to a comparable knife. So you can see here with the micarta scales and the liners not being inset that the button lock elementum is slightly thicker. When you look at the knife profile and you look at the cutting profile on these two, you can see, I'm trying to make sure the pivots are lined up, that the Ray Laconico has just a little bit more tip and a little bit more cutting edge, and then when you look at the handles, just a little bit longer. But the ergonomics, in my opinion, on the button lock are superior. Much nicer. Let me bring another comparable knife out here for you guys to have a look at, and that's going to be the Civivi Imperium. I think this really compares very well. The ergonomics, I'm going to give that to the Imperium here because it's much more comfortable in hand, and the scales, I know it's hard to tell, but they contour a little bit on here, which helps the ergonomics, and then the curve down helps the ergonomics. It is knocked down a little bit better on the edges too compared to the Ray Laconico. When you look at it from, again, a profile perspective, you can see that they are very similar cutting paths. You have just a little bit more because the Ray Laconico starts earlier and it goes out just slightly further, but still very similar cutting profiles. Both of these have swedges on the top, so they're going to be able to really reduce the drag that's coming through. The Ray Laconico is a little bit thinner on the back, but they feel very similar behind the edge as far as the thinness. They're both really thin at and behind the edge, and they both cut through materials like really good. From the handle perspective, it's very close, with the Laconico Sirius being just a little bit longer. So I thought these were good comparisons to bring out of here. If you're looking at this knife, some other things that you may want to take into consideration depending. Now, here's the thing before I wrap up and give you my final thoughts. I did catch the Sirius on a holiday sale for 55 bucks, so this ended up being a little bit less. Sorry, those finger smudges are really getting on my nerves. Ended up being a little bit less than the button lock or the Imperium when I bought them, but of course the Imperium and the button lock had a little sale going on at the end of the year too, so the price point would have been about the same. I think I would prefer the Nitro V on the Imperium to the 14C on the button lock and the AR RPM9 on the Artisan Cutlery. The only reason I say that is because I feel like the Nitro V does cut a little, it slices a little bit better. But when you get to the cardboard, I noticed that AR RPM9 feels like it has a toothiness to it, much like a D2, and that it kind of saws through that cardboard a little bit easier. And I was kind of surprised by that. I mean, I know it's their in-house steel, and I kind of get that's why they put this on their entry-level knives, and then as you go up in this, you can get more premium blade steel. I think it's S35EN. And the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about that really disappointed, on the G10, I have some feldspar. I have the feldspar. I have the Rhea. I think I have the scoria, and they all are chamfered really well around the edges. When I actually go to hold this, especially when I'm trying to cut through the cardboard, which is probably not the correct application to use this in to judge it, but I feel the sharpness right here from the thumb ramp, and then I can feel the edges a little bit on the G10 handles when I'm holding it. Now, I'm not saying that that's hot, but I'm just saying I really notice it when I'm holding the knife, and it takes away a little bit from the comfort for me. So I will say I'm a little disappointed on a couple of factors, but the build quality and the materials and how the blade is done and everything on the knife is really nice. So I do like those points very much. But those are my thoughts on the Ray Laconico. I think it's a good knife. I can recommend it, especially if you get it around that $55 mark. I feel like their AR RPM9, the G10 with the brass pivot collar, titanium deep carry pocket clip, and getting it on the ceramic ball bearings, really nice touch. I wish they'd give a little bit more space to get into the the liner lock there for us guys with larger hands. If you have smaller hands, it might not be a problem. But if you have smaller hands, look how much is left out for me. Here, let me do it like that so you can see where my fingers are landing. How much is left out of the actual knife for me? That's a lot that's left out for somebody with such large hands. So this is a really long knife. So just keep that in mind. It's not going to want to behave for me. Anyway, let me do it like this then. Those are my final thoughts and impressions. If you enjoyed the video, if you could leave a like for me, I really appreciate the support, and it helps me on the algorithm in YouTube. If you do enjoy content like this, consider subscribing. I'd love to have you follow along as I try to bring more content. Turn on those notifications so you get alerts whenever videos drop. I do try to do long-term reviews for the knives that I do keep, and you'll start to see those ramp back up in 2022. I died down a little bit towards the end of 21 because I was actually able to get some knives that I had been chasing, but I do want to get back to the long-term reviews and give you my thoughts and impressions, how the edges hold up on certain blades and steels from different manufacturers, things like that, in hopes that it helps you guys when you're considering buying knives. Again, I appreciate all the support. You guys are fantastic, wonderful. I hope you have a fantastic week. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, peace.